What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Stay Hot. I'm Bladen Kirk, joined as always by my two favorite co-hosts of all time, Matthew Sponhour and Theo Ash, and we present you the 100th episode of Stay Hot. It truly is incredible to be here. We're going to talk about the Jazz. We're going to talk about the NBA play-ins. Got a lot of basketball for you today. And I know Theo wants to rant a little bit about the Patriots. He feels they're a little bit underrated. So we'll get into all that. But before we do, Matt, Theo, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. It's a little bit of a gag that Theo Ash looks like every single person, and he has 100 different people that he looks a lot alike. You've got a Twitter thread going.
Matt Corral,
but I was watching
QB1.
LA Without a Map today, starring a young David Tennant, and I couldn't pay attention because it really looks like Theo Ash is starring in this movie.
It does? All right. Who are some of the famous names on there? I've gotten Matt Corral recently. I actually made a video on that.
Yeah.
I've gotten Christian
Theo is
Slater.
QB1.
Yeah. I've gotten Christian Slater. I've gotten who else? I can't remember everybody off the top of my head. It's been a while since I've added to that list.
You've gotten a lot.
I've gotten Jake T. Austin from Wizards of Waverly Place is one. I've gotten Justin Tucker, I remember. I've gotten, I can't all remember. It's been a lot of guys, though, and those are just a few off the top of my head. I've gotten Bengal from, who I think looks a little bit more like you, Matt, but I've gotten him. I've gotten.
What do you
Bengal
think it is
is
about
like
you
a
that makes
mix
you look?
between
Because
the
it's not like you don't look kind of like a lot of people. You do.
I do.
Or
Yeah,
these
no,
people.
they're not necessarily
what do you
wrong.
think it is?
Well, there's a couple defining features about my face that really... I found the list. Okay, Jonathan Byers from Stranger Things, Ferris Bueller, Pete Davidson, Cillian Murphy. Who's the guy? The incel killer, the serial killer incel dude,
Riddler?
Elliot Rogers, I think. No, not Riddler.
About the Riddler.
Elliot Rogers I've gotten. Eric from that 70s show. I've gotten Justin Herbert before. Christian Yelich. Steve Buscemi. I've gotten the Onceler from the Lorax. I've gotten a lot of people. I've gotten, I think, who is this? Trotsky, I think that is. I've gotten basically every kid on TikTok who is brunette. I have gotten, it's been a lot.
When you think
if you look
the middle part,
if you look at the Weezer cover, the guy I think who looks the most like me, the Weezer, the Blue Album, the guy on the far right looks exactly like me. And here's the defining feature: the medium length brown hair, sharp jawline, and big lips. That is the key. That's the defining feature. Very full white dude, brunette white dude with a good jawline and full lips. That is the Theo Ash formula. And that is how you look like me. That's the key.
You're gonna have people on TikTok trying to look like you now, Theo.
The StatMuse account, the official account of StatMuse on TikTok, will tag me in random videos of just guys who look like me and just say at Theo Ash NFL. This you? StatMuse, what are you talking about? Why are you doing this?
I think it's so funny how much drama
tagged,
StatMuse has on Twitter.
I think so too. And now we got Hater Muse.
That's Hater Muse and Positivity Muse.
Which is
Muse has more followers.
I was gonna do Cody Martin Muse as a gag, and then just keep posting Cody Martin stats on my Twitter account, but they don't have a drawn picture for him, so it wouldn't work.
You need neutral Muse. There's Positivity Muse, Hater Muse, and then you just need the most.
Post when guys do all right. This guy had 18 points today, and that's his season average.
Yes. I don't know. Desmond Bain had 4 assists today.
Yeah, I might make that.
Pretty good. I think that would really be a good account. So if you're going to make it, you're going to have to make it by the time this podcast comes out, because everybody's going to be jumping on it. But yeah, we could also have someone else do it and just know that we're the ones who came up with it. But anyway, That would be a good bit.
No. Daniel's in this. Daniel, our social manager, is in this recording right now. You know what to do. Anyway, make sure you guys subscribe to the YouTube channel. It is the 100th episode. So if we don't gain at least 100 subscribers today, mediocre. But Theo, I know you wanted to talk about the Patriots. You think, they're a little bit underrated. I know they just traded a 3rd round pick for Devontae Parker. Do you think that helps? Do you think that helps their receiving core significantly?
I don't know if it helps out a little bit. I think that he is someone who hasn't had this type of season in a while, but is capable of being a number one and putting up 1,200 yards in a season. We've seen it before. Will it happen again? I'm not sure, but for a 3rd round pick, it's I think an all right bet. He's not going to be super expensive, even if he's not someone who's really coveted that you're going to have to pay this big deal. So I thought that was a decent move. I'm a Kendrick Bourne fan. I'm a Jacoby Myers fan. I think that wide receiving core is sneakily competent and it's not so bad. And I honestly think Mac Jones is a little underrated. I mean, we haven't been the biggest Mac Jones cheerleader podcast in the past.
We have not.
But he has
I don't plan on
the baseline of good play. I mean, the number one key is can the dude play football? And the dude clearly can. He has good pocket presence. He can avoid sacks. He can read the field well. And he stepped into a offensive situation that was definitely better than the other rookies. But even if he didn't, I think that you'd see some positive things with him. And it's just they made the playoffs last year, and it's Belichick, and I don't know. I feel like that's a team that could finish ahead of the Dolphins in the standings, and that's where I kind of think they're underrated. Is they can beat out the Dolphins and finish second in that division, and it's not underrated to a really high degree, but some people have totally written them off this year. But it wouldn't surprise me to see them have a winning record or be kind of sneaky.
Right.
Good.
It's I think a lot of people, because we're going to start seeing people's predictions come out they do the whole win-loss thing for everybody.
Right.
And there's so many teams in the AFC. You're going to see a lot of people have everyone, every team in the AFC West has to have a winning record, and the Dolphins will be better, and the Bills are going to be good, and a million other teams. And you might see, I think you're going to see people have the Patriots at 4 wins, 5 wins.
Yeah.
I think you're going to see them have them really,
people
really
are going to be really low on the Patriots. Yes.
I mean, when you think about a lot of these other teams that, people are predicting to be really, I mean, the Chargers didn't make the playoffs last year. The Broncos were 7-10. The Browns and Ravens both had a losing record, and, those were for, extraneous reasons, but the Dolphins missed the playoffs last year, and I don't know. It's I don't know if adding Tyreek Hill and Terron Armstead, obviously significant improvement. I don't know. I don't get good vibes from the Miami Dolphins.
My thing with the Dolphins is this. I think that they could make the playoffs for sure, and I think their ceiling is high. But my concern with them is their starting point, because they went 9-8 last year, right? And but they started 1-7, and then they ended 7-1. And through that 7-1 stretch, everyone knew they were fraudulent. Right. Everyone knew they were just playing these easy teams, and they weren't all that. And they were like, oh my, are the Dolphins actually going to do it? And it was common knowledge at the time that it was okay, they're beating up on these easy teams. They're not real. And then they lost to the Titans pretty badly. Tua had a horrible, horrible game, and they knocked themselves out of the playoffs. And everyone is like, okay, there it is. They just got exposed by a good team finally. So then the season ends, and it's okay, is this closer to a 1-7 team or a 7-1 team, roster wise? What is the starting point? Are they really a 9-8 caliber? Are they building from a 9-8 place? Or even though that was their record, should we assume that they were closer to a 5-6 win team? And that's the jump we're asking them to come from.
You look at the team. So looking at the teams they beat last year, week 1, they beat the Patriots by 1 point.
Which was a fumble at the very end. It was a miracle they won that game.
And it's that was Mac Jones' first game ever. So it's how much, but they did also end up beating the Patriots late in the season too.
They
at
did.
the end of the year. Then they lose 7 straight after that. Then they beat the Houston Texans. They beat the Houston Texans 17-9. They beat the most injury-riddled Baltimore Ravens of all time.
No, this was before. That was their one quality win because Lamar was healthy in that game. That was just
Lamar
a
healthy
good.
That game?
He was healthy that game, and he had a really poor game.
10.
That was their good win.
Hold on, I thought Lamar was out that game.
No, he was not. He very much played, and he had a horrible game. Yes.
Okay. But the rest of the Ravens were still hurt though.
The Ravens were definitely very injured last year with their secondary and running back room and Ronnie Stanley. But yes, the rest of the game, it was like read off the rest of the schedule.
Yeah, the rest of the list: Jets scraped by, Panthers, Giants, Jets scraped by again, Saints. Then they get destroyed by Tennessee, and they beat the Patriots by 9. And you look at like the teams that they lost. Like they played the Bills, throttled by the Bills.
Right, they were not a good team.
The Buccaneers.
Yes,
they lost to the Falcons.
So I think we need to go ahead, Matt.
I kind of think that maybe this is not the way I would go about looking at the Dolphins. They're such a different team that, I mean, yeah, they were 9-8 last year, but if we just look at what they are currently right now, we don't really need to think too much about their win-loss total last year.
Right.
Because I think if you look at every team, it's like, okay, well, where were they last year? And then how much every team is going to feel like they improved from where they were last year. I look at the Dolphins, like how strong really is that offense? I think I'm not 100% sure, but I don't think I'm putting too much weight on them going 9-8 last year with, I would say that them getting 9 wins in spite of having the worst offensive line in the league is pretty impressive and a young quarterback.
It is.
I think their offensive line is a lot better and they've got really good receivers.
Yes, I would say this. Yes, the Dolphins could make the playoffs. I'm not doubting that. I'm just also saying the Patriots, I think they're a team that made the playoffs last year. I still think that they're going to have a decent defense even without J.C. Jackson. I think that they can pull something together. I still trust Belichick. That's kind of what comes down to is I don't think he's washed. I think like they can pull out some wins. If you look at their opponents, which is their home opponents, the Colts, I think they can win that game. The Bears, I think they can win that game. Jets, Dolphins, Lions, and then you get tough teams, the Bengals. This is not the right year. Or no, yes it is. Yes it is. Bengals, Bills, Ravens are the tough ones. The rest are all winnable, I think, in Bears, Colts, Lions, Dolphins, Jets. And even you can steal a game from those 3. And then their away opponents are a little bit tougher, but you've still got Steelers, Jets, Vikings in there. I don't know. I just think like with this move for Devontae Parker, I think that people are going to totally write off the Patriots as just not having the star power to compete in the AFC. And I think that they can sneak a sneaky good season in there. They're
going to consistently be a team that you really have to go beat.
Yeah.
That's not a W you can write down. I think
where the Patriots have their star power is that they have Bill Belichick.
And Bill Belichick is still a really great coach. Thing.
Yeah.
He gets clowned on for not being as great at like team building and being a GM with some of the decisions he makes. But as a coach, he always tends to get the best out of his players. That's really where I'm a little bit worried with the Dolphins is they did this with Brian. They went 9-8 with Brian Flores, right? So what's, I don't know.
The Dolphins are a reasonably talented team. Their defense is good enough for them to have a good defense, talent-wise, and offensively, they have enough firepower. Now you can talk about whatever you want to talk about when it comes down to Tua, but I think they've got enough weapons where you're like, yeah, can this team win 10 games? Absolutely. So then it comes down to how good McDaniel is as a coach, and we don't really know that.
Yeah. So that's what it comes down to is like Patriots or Dolphins. I think everybody's going to have the Dolphins second in that division. And maybe I'm wrong and they're not overrated because I haven't seen a lot of projections so far. But I think the Patriots might be able to make a case I I trust their quarterback and their coaching staff, and that's what it comes down to. And I somewhat trust their defense, even though they lost J.C. Jackson. I like Kyle Ducker a lot. I think he could be a Pro Bowl caliber player. And just overall, like, Judon is going to have another good season. I think he's been consistent for a while now. Anyway, that's probably all the NFL stuff I have to talk about. And we should probably get into the NBA here, which is more interesting right now.
Basketball. I know you guys wanted to talk about the play-ins at this point and, who, is potentially going to make it. I know the Lakers recently got kind of bumped out of that range, but they're still kind of on the fringe. They could still get back in.
They're not doing anything.
They're not doing it. LeBron is questionable tonight.
Yeah.
They're not. It's LeBron's like all banged up, and Anthony Davis is just coming back, and like, what are we talking about? Are they gonna sneak back into the plans, win 2 games, and then go beat the Suns?
And let's talk about the games they have left: Nuggets, Suns, Warriors, Thunder, Nuggets. They're going to have to win probably 4 of those last 5, 3 of those last 5, with LeBron banged up, Anthony Davis just getting back. The team probably, maybe they just lock in and go crazy, like it's an elimination game every time, but it's just tough for me to see a scenario where the Lakers are really worth even talking about at this point. And I think they even bring up the question, are the plans a good thing in your opinion? Because last year they happened, and I enjoyed the games. It was especially that Lakers Warriors game, LeBron versus Curry, when LeBron hit that game winning 3 to send the Lakers to the playoffs pretty much after he was hurt all year. Exciting stuff, and I was like, okay, I like this. But now, like, with a whole year, and you've got these just horrible teams with a chance to knock off some teams that might legitimately deserve it for a 2-game stretch. I'm a little bit unsure of how I feel, and maybe it'll go away when I see some great playing games. And I get the argument. It's like, okay, well, if you're better than this team, go prove it and beat them. But I don't know. How do you feel, Matt?
I like them, and I've heard a lot. The popular take right now is that, why do we have the play-ins? And I get it to an extent, but the play-ins are good. The play-ins are good. First off, it is more elimination basketball, which is what the NBA desperately needs. Like, more, it's always fun to watch. The games are good. Like, we had LeBron hit that game-winning shot. Like, that stuff is sick.
Yeah.
Now, as far as the argument against it, it's kind of like with college football playoffs, right? Like, the big argument against college football expansion is it ruins the stake of the regular season, right? Because now it's just so easy to get in. But with the NBA, it's easy to get in regardless. And I actually don't think that it does hurt the stakes. Like, for instance, instead of the 6 and the 7 seed playing for, just like who you match up against, they're playing between, being in an elimination playoff game in the play-ins and being safely in the playoffs. And that's a pretty big deal. And then when it comes down to those later teams and the 9 and the 10, it's still a big disadvantage. Like, the 7 seed to the 10 seed, huge disadvantage. We're talking about you got to win 1 of 2 games versus you got to win 2 in a row. Right? So I think they're more interesting. I think that they make sort of like the 6 to 10 seeds more interesting. It does keep more teams in the playoffs, but it doesn't take away the stakes of where you seed, and it gives you more good basketball. I mean, you look at it right now, Hornets and Nets would match up. That'll be a fun matchup. It's a 9 and 10 matchup, but that'll be interesting to watch. It'll be high stakes. So I get, it's like, Jesus, how many teams are we going to let in the playoffs? But I don't think it's too bad. It's on paper, it sounds like a lot, but I don't think it's too bad.
Yeah, I agree to an extent. Like I'm going to watch the playing games, and I'm going to find them very exciting. Like, when they're happening, the meme where it's like, bitches be like, can't stand whatever, 10 minutes later, me and the bestie, and it's like SpongeBob and Squidward. If you've ever seen that, that's kind of what I feel like talking shit about the play-ins, where it's like, right. Oh, I can't stand the play-ins. 10 minutes later, oh my God, what a game. So it's definitely that, but it does kind of like, man, the Lakers are 31 and 46 at this point. and they're fighting for the playoffs. It's like, man, you could probably just be eliminated, and I wouldn't care that much. But
I don't disagree with that. However, they won't make the playoffs.
Right. And
like they're like, they should be eliminated now, sure, but they're going to be. Like, it's very, very likely that they do. And the play-ins are not the playoffs. They're fighting to have to win multiple in a row against,
right.
Timberwolves, Clippers, whatnot. And for every Lakers, there's a Pelicans, or there's a Brooklyn Nets, or a Charlotte Hornets. Or like, you can look at the West and it's a terrible problem, right? You look at the East and the plans are doing exactly what they're supposed to. Instead of the regular season coming down to the last couple of games to decide this 8th spot between the Hawks, the Hornets, and Nets, who are all interesting teams. Nets, obviously, probably more than the Hawks or the Hornets. But we have the Nets, who are a major contender, a team that made the Eastern Conference Finals last year.
Yes.
And my Charlotte Hornets.
Most importantly.
Instead of having it be where, one of them's going to. That's not the case. There's still an advantage to being the 8th seed. They're playing. The regular season matters. Whoever's the 8th seed only has to win 1 of 2 games. But now instead of wondering, oh man, what if the Hornets had gotten one more shot to fall in the regular season, they still have a chance to make the playoffs, or the Nets still have a chance to make the playoffs. And all those teams have winning records. So I think they all do deserve a chance to at least, even if it's a tough road, a chance to at least make the playoffs. So I think the plans are really good.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I can get down with that.
I definitely think like if you're looking for a team, like, if we want to go back like just a little bit to the NFL, and you think about like, everyone's talking about how good the AFC is, right? And you're like, now if we had 8 teams that are fighting for these playoff spots, you're like, okay, that Chargers Raiders game at the end of the
we did have it.
Eight teams. Okay. You have 8 teams fighting for a playoff spot. That Chargers Raiders game at the end of the season isn't like a game to decide the playoffs. That's just a play-in game. Right. And I think that's kind of the idea. And I think that's I
don't know. I like it. I do. It's easy to look at the Western Conference where it's 3 teams with losing records. But you look at the Eastern Conference and it's 4 teams with winning records. And I really do think all of them deserve to be maybe not in the playoffs, but at least playing to get to the playoffs and having those elimination games. And it's like, is Brooklyn going to be able to win back-to-back games? And it's like, do you feel like the stakes are low right now? Absolutely not. We're watching every single game of these guys because any one game can flip the seedings from being the 10 seed to the 8 seed, which is a huge deal. So I really like it.
It does kind of flip the threat. Like, it almost creates 2 thresholds to look out for.
Exactly.
The 7 and the 6 seed, and also the 11 and the 10 seed. So it really does, I guess, now that I think about it, feel that, there is more stakes, because there's not only the teams fighting, down at the bottom in the 11, 10 type of spot, but there's also that battle going on in the 6, 7 spot, which usually just was a pretty safe place to be. So yeah, I can get talked into to them being good, but it does feel a little bit weird when you've got teams like 14 games under 500. But I digress. Let's talk about the physical teams in the play-ins and which ones we think are actually going to make it into the playoffs. And right now,
start in the East or
let's start in the West, because I have it out in front of me.
Okay.
All right. Well, in the Western Conference, you have.
For you, Theo.
It's not set. The Nuggets could very well fall into the 7th seed. It's not impossible. However, they're 2 games up on the Timberwolves.
Yes.
And we're kind of getting down to it, where a 2-game lead is serious work.
It would be a choke.
The 5 teams
right
to talk
now,
about it would be a pretty big choke. So you've got Timberwolves at 7, Clippers at 8, Pelicans at 9, Spurs at 10, and then Lakers at 11 after that. The Kings aren't eliminated, but they
you can talk about number 12. You can talk about
we can, but they're 3.5 games back, so they would need to win out and have the Spurs lose out.
And they're on a 2-game winning streak right now.
Hey,
which means they're bound to lose. So
they're due.
We've talked about the Lakers and how difficult their schedule is and how banged up LeBron is, that I think we got to talk about it as the Spurs are going to make it instead of them. And as many ratings and as interesting as it is to talk about the Los Angeles Lakers, I think we kind of got to leave them out of this conversation and talk about the Spurs, the Pelicans, the Clippers, and the Timberwolves. which is
before you get into it, what 2 teams are you taking?
Before I get into it, I am taking the Timberwolves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then I really have to think about the Clippers and the Pelicans, because here's what's interesting about the West.
The Pelicans.
I might also take the Pelicans. Look, I looked at point differential, which I consider to be kind of a god stat. And when I talk about my March Madness formula, I've talked about it before, and my bracket was not actually that good this year, but take from it what you will. But when I was trying to look at like what I was going to use to predict all these games last year, I was thinking about it. I'm like, I'm going to put together, I think, 2 just really good indicators of things, which is, the first is point differential, because not only is it winning and losing, it also kind of punishes just scraping by. And like, if you lose a big time, it kind of takes that into account. Point differential is a really, really good statistic, because not like wins that could be losses are not rewarded as much as like you just being good and just beating the brakes off a team, or, you know, a loss that could be a win or is not counted as much. It just is automatically factored into all that. So I was like, I want that stat. And I also want strength of schedule, because, you know, if you're playing the easiest teams in the world and you beat them by a lot, that just doesn't mean as much as if you're in the Big Ten or SEC or whatever. So that's the formula that I came up with. And then later I realized that this formula has actually been thought of before, and it's called simple rating system. And it's actually quite a popular statistic that people figured out like a decade and a half ago. But anyway, I digress. That point differential is a good stat, and I'm not the only one who thinks that. Last year, the top 4 teams in the West in point differential, they were the Jazz, the Clippers, the Suns, and the Nuggets, I believe. Or were they and a lot of those teams were the ones that were they were the final 4 teams left, but except for the Clippers. The Jazz, the Clippers, the Suns, and the Nuggets. Those were the final 4 teams left, right? The Jazz, the Clippers, the Suns, and the Nuggets were top 4 in the West since the All-Star break in point differential. And those were the final 4 teams left. In the East, since the All-Star break, post All-Star break, point differential, 76ers, Hawks, Bucks, Nets. Those were the final 4 teams left. All right. So the top 8 teams in each conference were the last 8 teams left. Those were the teams that made it on the first round. This year, in terms of point differential since the All-Star break, it's Grizzlies, Suns, Timberwolves, Pelicans. Those are the teams leading in point differential since the All-Star break. So the Timberwolves and Pelicans have been playing better basically than any other team in the West since the All-Star break. So I kind of
Pelicans have been turning it on. And what it is that people forgot a little bit that CJ McCollum is actually like really, really good.
Yes.
Now I have my problems with the Pelicans defensively long term, but as a team, we're not talking about like them making a run. We're talking about them getting through the plans. They've got gas on offense. That team is good.
Yes.
And you look at the Clippers and it's like,
I was just going to say, the one that we always talk about is like teams getting hot at the end of the season. And that's a good point to bring up, is like how well a team is going to, be closing out games at the end of the season. That's a big deal. It's like, who cares if you're, beating people bad early on? If you can't sustain that throughout the season, it doesn't mean anything. Like if the Suns have had the best record in the NBA all year, right? But if, they had, cut off, 40 games, they did.
Right.
They're, we're
things that happen in the beginning of the year
still going hard.
Things that happen at the beginning of the year don't not matter. Of course, they help you get set up for the end of the year better. But you really do want to be playing your best basketball at the end. So that's why I factored in post All-Star break, because I don't really care what happened in September. But anyway, Matt, keep talking about the Pelicans.
No, I was just saying, like, you look at some of the other, like the Clippers, barring 40-point Robert Covington games. Even with Paul George coming back, it's like it's tough because he's just barely fighting to get back on the court as the play-ins start. It's tough to get into a groove that quickly. I know it seems like, well, you have him, but that team does not have a lot of gas on offense. Even with Norman Powell, they've had one of the worst offenses in the league this year, pretty much. And I know they just dropped like 150 points on a Bucks team that I don't think any of their big three were playing. But unless Robert Covington is dropping 40 a night, I'm worried about that team on offense. They haven't been playing very good basketball overall recently. I want to say that they're kind of on a little bit of a skid. They were at one point fighting to be in like that 6th spot, and now they're not. Maybe I'm making that up.
Yeah,
but I don't know.
Something that's interesting is I believe they play the New Orleans Pelicans today. So that'll be an interesting.
That is interesting.
That's a very interesting matchup and perhaps a preview. But yeah, the Pelicans, because the Pelicans have more juice on offense than they do. Like even with Paul George, Brandon Ingram is a certified bucket getter. I've been talking about him a lot, and I think he's going to start to really be in the conversation as one of the best forwards in the league after this season. I really do. And I really think that he is. And McCollum, and I guess you could maybe say the same thing is like, I don't know where Zion's progress is. I would assume they don't have him for the play-ins, but like, I don't know. I would say the odds of that are pretty low, but dude, when this team gets Zion back, they are at the minimum going to be very fun to watch. Yes.
This team with the Brandon Ingram, McCollum, Zion, Valanciunas out there, I really like what they're going to be able to do on offense. Defensively, maybe a little bit of a different story. But.
And then there's like guys like Jose Alvarado on that team, which, they just play like they're on a 10-day all the time, and he just kind of brings, or Herb Jones, who's been.
Herb Jones has been really good too. I know he's been fantastic on defense for them overall. Yeah. And that's been big time for them. So I really like the direction of the Pelicans. Now, I'm being very biased this episode. I love the play-ins, and my favorite team is always the 9th seed. And all the Pelicans will make it out of the play-ins because that would give the Hornets an extra first-round draft pick. But I really do think they're trending in the right direction at the right time, even without Zion.
Yes, I would agree. And I remember Herb Jones is someone that when they play the Suns, they would put on Booker. And Herb Jones did a pretty good job on Booker, especially the second to latest time they played. And it's like, if they do match up with the Clippers, he's about as good of a guy that you want on Paul George as you can have. That's kind of a similar thing, even though he's a small forward and George is a guard. You still can match that up. But
bring me playoff games from Brandon Ingram. That's what we need.
We do need that.
And also, it's just like, I know the Clippers are like, if they were healthy, we'd be talking about a completely different thing. But I think just as like a fan of like, I want the playoffs to be good, I'd like to see the Pelicans go up and see them maybe at least take maybe a game from the Suns or something.
Yeah, we'll see. I would be if I was the Suns. I mean, they've done a good job on us in the past. The Pelicans have done a good job on the Suns in the past. They got a game from them recently, and it's hard to get a game from the Suns. It's hard to win a game against the Suns, and they did. Played us tough the last time they played as well. So yeah, Pelicans definitely they're my pick as well, Matt. And the point differential since the All-Star break, I think, kind of reflects that. And if you also haven't noticed, the Timberwolves were also on that list, and they were actually third. And that the way that they've kind of realized their potential and realized that when they lock in what they can do on offense, and it just. I've seen people know, like, whenever they play the Timberwolves, they're like, damn, this Timberwolves team is playing us like it's game 7 of the finals. It's like, I've heard people kind of complain, like they took a game off the Bucks, and like Bucks Twitter that I follow is like, man, why are the T-Wolves trying this hard? It's because like, well, they have Patrick Beverly, A, who's always going to go the extra mile. And B, they just they bought in, and a lot of them have not tasted a lot of success, or at least Cat hasn't. And, I think like Cat is playing a little bit differently this year, and his energy is a little bit different this year. And they realize they think of themselves as contenders now. I don't know if that makes sense, but they're a team that we talked about before. I love the person that D'Lo has become as a defensively and as a playmaker, and how his game has grown there. Cat is having the best offensive year of his career. I think it's fair to say. I haven't looked at the numbers, but that's sure what it seems like. And a lot of their young players have been solid starters for them, and they've just been blowing teams out. They have just been blowing teams out over the past couple months, like putting up 130, 130, 130, 130, 120, 110, 130, like crazy offensive performances. And I think they can at least win a game here in the play-ins, which is all they'll need to do.
I mean, yeah, they're like, we can break it down all you want. They're way far ahead of every other team in the play-ins in the West. I mean, they're 10 over 500. All the other teams have losing records. I do kind of wonder with those teams. It's like, okay, well, their intensity is really crazy. I wonder how does that project poorly for them if they're just like kind of out intensing teams in the regular season, and then you get to the playoffs and it's like, well, now we don't have the advantage of just being more intense than everyone else. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but I'll be interested to see.
I don't know. I think intensity is an interesting thing because a lot of people think, oh, you have to like save it for the playoffs. You don't want to go too hard in the regular season. But if you're at a point where you're like fighting for the play-ins, you already have to play intense, right? You're already going to have to play intense just to, keep at this, level if you're trying to make the play-ins. But then also, if you try and save everything you have until the end, it's an 82 game season. You're going to be tired, right? It's like we talk about this in track all the time. You're running a 400. You're going to be tired at the end regardless. So if you're going to die at the end, you're going to die at the end. Are you going to die going all out, right? And die having a great season or a great time? Or are you going to die and run a 58? Or are you going to die on a 40-win season and miss the play-ins and then go into the play-ins and lose, or go into the playoffs and lose in the first round, right? So like, it's like you can manage all you want, but when it doesn't work out, was it even worth it, or would you rather have just gone all out from the jump?
You want to be intense. I mean, obviously you're a professional team and you're going to be intense every week. But yeah, Matt, I do think like teams that and the T-Wolves are more than just intensity. They have legit star power, and they have legit. But I don't know. I think it's just refreshing to see a T-Wolves team playing like that.
And I think that's been a lot of their problem is they've been kind of disjointed and playing with that intensity consistently. The flip side of that would be like, well, now they're used to playing like that.
Right. I think that's where
that well together. And that's definitely where you should be.
I think it has to do with team chemistry too. And it just like, I think it's overall a very good thing. And I don't think they turn the Jets on too early or anything like that. Cause again, they are fighting for a playoff spot. So I think that it's a good thing that they look this locked in, and it's a good thing they look this good, and it's a good thing that they're playing teams as tough as they are, and they're looking to run up the score, and they're looking to put up 150 every night. I don't think that it's really going to be like, they're not all intensity. They're not just some team that's try-harding their way, like some bum team that's just like try-harding their way into the playoffs. I know you don't like to talk about Theo, but like it's kind of momentum. You put up a few 140 games. Put up 140 games. Like that's going to carry.
I believe in momentum. Talk about all the on the court stuff. They've got momentum, and sometimes that's all you need.
Yes. Yes. This is a nuanced conversation. Momentum is, I believe in getting hot, like at the right time and like playing well. Obviously, my take with momentum has always been like, sometimes when you a bunch of good things happen to you, I kind of feel like,
I think that's just what momentum is. It's like a bunch of good things happen. That's like momentum, and it's more of I think you look at it more of a describing word. I just think it's funny. It's like, this is what the Timberwolves have been missing. They just needed momentum.
They just needed momentum. Yeah, they're playing well. I just think like momentum can cause teams to take their foot off the gas sometimes, if you get
you think the momentum will just carry you.
If the other team just got punched in the mouth, they as professional athletes rise like that, like kind of sparks them. Like if you just fumbled, you're probably going to hold the football a little bit tighter next time, like, and maybe the other team is a little bit more. So I don't think momentum always like, if one team has momentum, they're going to win the game. They have momentum going into overtime, they're going to win the game. Like Baylor versus UNC, if we're going to like, Baylor came all the way back just to lose in overtime, even though they had it's like sometimes like it does, like, yes, it's a descriptor of what just happened, but I don't think it's a good indicator of what's about to happen next, because you never know when the other team is going to like put their foot down. And I think sometimes teams that go on big runs either lighten up a little bit, take their foot off the gas, or they run out of gas if it's a big comeback. But anyway, that's more in game. I definitely believe in teams getting hot at the right time and being good and stringing wins together. That is not what I ever say when I say momentum is overrated or not real. But
I know we have to
be less nuanced than that.
Gotta play the bit.
One team we haven't talked about at all is the San Antonio Spurs. We don't really see them. They were in the play-ins last year in about a similar spot. and they lost because DeRozan looked horrible and bricked all of his shots, and then they were bounced pretty early. This year, they're still there. They're worth a conversation. I thought that they had the potential to be one of the best or the worst teams in basketball before the season because DeJounte Murray was their best player, and I guess I didn't think that he was really all that good before the year, but he is pretty good. And overall, like despite their lack of star power, they're still here above the Lakers, who have a lot of star power. And, you know, shout out Popovich and shout out the Spurs. They're always around and hanging around. But when it comes to like winning a game against the Timberwolves, I don't know if I trust them to do that or make it out of here.
Oh, it's like, you know, March Madness or whatever. I do think the Spurs are probably not quite as good as the Pelicans or certainly not the Timberwolves, but it's a single game. And if you're acting like the Spurs, it's not a series, right? So in a series against the Timberwolves, yeah, okay, I'm taking the Timberwolves. In a game, well, I mean, it's a single game. We could be talking all this and it's like, you know, the Clippers offense really bad, right? Well, Robert Covington dropped 40 last night. So it's like anything can happen.
Anything can happen.
I like a lot of their guys. I'm a big Jakob Poeltl fan. I'm a big DeJounte Murray fan. I like these guys. They're well coached. And I think that bodes really, really well for them. But yeah, I don't have them winning 2 in a row.
Yeah,
their odds are probably against them a little bit.
To project them to like they can win that game, but to like pick them to do it is a little bit dicey. So that is the West. We're sleeping on the Clippers, I guess, which could be dangerous because in a world where they come out of it and Kawhi
it
comes
all depends
back,
on what, like with Paul George stuff,
right?
And
but
Kawhi.
Yeah, we're sleeping on the Clippers. They could be. They could lose. They could not make it at all. They could make it out of the West. Who knows? They're a weird team to judge right now. It's difficult. But moving on to the Eastern Conference, which is maybe even the more interesting play-in, we got Matt's Hornets. We got the Brooklyn Basketball Nets, and we got who else do we got there?
It's Cavs 7,
oh, right,
Hawks
Cavs,
8, Hornets 9, Nets 10.
Cleveland.
You want to know what? You know what? You want to know what the Cavs point differential post All-Star break has been, Bladen?
It's probably not very good, I'm guessing.
It's minus 64, which is the third worst of any team that is contending for a play-in spot right now. They have lost it. The worst team is the Lakers, but also
the Cavs are hurt.
Well, yeah, they're still going to be hurt. And guess what? They are still going to be hurt in the playoffs.
Their big advantage, dude, Jarrett Allen is just not someone you can lose, and it's just okay. It's just not the way that it is. He is
one of the best centers in basketball.
He's a top 5 center, right?
He was made let's see, there's obviously Embiid.
Who are you putting ahead of him?
Obviously Embiid, obviously Jokic.
Cat are the easy ones.
Bam, yeah. I'd put Bam above him, but I wouldn't put Ayton above him.
Not Ayton above him. I guess Gobert. I don't know. He's close. He's arguably top 5, and it shows. He's 5, really important.
Maybe 6.
Yeah.
So it's like,
yeah, really good defensively. I think what did he lead the league in blocks per game or something like that. Plus, a crazy good offensive rating as well, and someone who just is automatic, like below the basket. So
he's what a big tough center is supposed to be. He does all that stuff very well. Guys like that are just so important to the offense and the defense and all that good stuff. And you can't lose someone like that. And
especially when you're a team that was kind of overperforming like the Cavs were, and maybe weren't quite the 3 or 4 seed caliber team that they were playing like at the beginning of the year.
The Cavs kind of feel like the Eagles to me, where they were just a little ahead of schedule, little overperforming. I don't know. And, you know, if they could have stayed healthy, maybe they could have won. You know, got into the playoffs, but I don't even know if they would have won a game there.
I'll say that they do have the advantage of they only need to win 1, but I honestly think that I might still pick against them to make it, just because they are. So I would have to look. I'll be 100% honest. I don't know who is supposed to be back. Allen is like questionable to come back, so I'll say if Allen is back, yeah, I have him making the playoffs. If not, I don't. I think that's probably what it comes down to.
That's fair.
Okay, who's all expected to come back, like soon?
I think Allen would be a stretch because his finger has been messed up. overall,
Is
in a
Mobley
week,
still out? Like Mobley's still going to be out, right? Or is he?
Yeah,
I think that he will be back,
I think.
but I could be wrong.
I don't know.
They're not okay. Jarrett Allen and Mobley are not expected to play Sunday, but they are hopeful.
Right.
They are hopeful. So we don't know. We basically are not sure.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just seems like they've kind of run out of juice. And if they play the Nets round one, I just don't know. As far as the point differential goes, here's how it goes. The Hawks, 83. They're the first. They have the best point differential post All-Star break. Then it's the Hornets at 60. Then it is the Nets at 6, or at the Nets at 20. And then it is the Cavaliers at minus 64. So as far as post All-Star break performance goes, it has been pretty clearly like the Cavs have been very much a tier below the other three teams in there. It would suggest Hawks and Hornets coming out of there, but the Nets have so much star power that I almost kind of want
the Hornets, if they match up against the Nets, I don't think they're going to win.
That's
God
kind
bless
of
them. And the Hornets have been playing really good, and they're getting Gordon Hayward back. That's not how this one ends. It doesn't.
So, okay, do you don't trust the Hornets against the Nets?
Yes.
Fair enough, but you do trust them against the Hawks, who were in the Eastern Conference Finals last year.
Do you trust him against the Hawks?
How'd you just, Bladen? I didn't say that. I don't trust them against any. I don't trust them against anybody, dude. They lost by 40 to the Pacers last time they got here, and that was the biggest game they had played in about 5 years. I mean, it's just. I don't mean to be like just the stereotypical negative fan, but I'm also not going to come on my podcast and tell them like, yeah, they're going to beat the Nets. No, I don't. That's bad karma. It's bad. Like I'm jinxing them if I say they win. But honestly, I mean, it just comes down to, I do kind of think that maybe they're not terrible matchups with any team that doesn't like have a great center.
Right. There's no team that is like, okay, like Sabonis or some like interior guy is just going to come back and just kill them. The Hawks don't really have that guy. The Nets don't really have that guy. So the Hornets are probably glad for that because that's what they're bad at. And if you're looking on the bright side, yeah, Matt, you're right. And at least there's that.
Well, it's yeah. And the other thing, it's like, if you want me to be maybe a little bit less cynical, I do think they have a pretty good shot against the Nets. But the problem is, it's just like I have a hard time seeing Kevin Durant and Kyrie not stepping up and figuring that game out. As far as the Hawks go, Trae Young is a beast. I think that team is very beatable, but they're also trending in the right direction right now. And Capella is maybe not as good as he was last year, I think, when I've watched him, but maybe that's me not paying attention. But I do think, against Plumlee, I'm a little bit worried about it. And then with the Cavs, I mean, if the Cavs don't have Jarrett Allen and Mobley, I feel good about it. If they do, I mean, that's like one of the worst possible matchups they can have. Outside of like the 76ers, it might be the worst, just because it's like, I don't know how they're going to guard that guy. So I don't think it bodes well for them. I do think they'll end up being the 9 seed. And if they play the Nets, I think that might be it.
Yeah, here I'm kind of betting on the star power, which I wasn't so much in not Chris Paul. Jeez, I keep getting that wrong. Paul George. with the Clippers, and I think it's a little bit different because of just the length of time that they've been back, and it's just like the groove that they're in, and Paul George has not been super stellar since coming back. He hasn't had any huge games yet, so. I don't know. I'm betting on the star power here, and I'm taking the Hawks and the Nets. Those are the two I'm.
And that's what I'm taking as well.
I think it's a really good. I'm looking at some stats for the Hawks right now. Since the All-Star break, they are 6th in points per game. They're the best in the league at avoiding turnovers. Like they're like no other team is doing that right now. I mean, and they're the best in the league at that by a pretty wide margin. You look at all the other, like the Timberwolves are number 1 in points per game right now, but they're averaging 14 turnovers a game. We can look at the Suns even, which are 4th. They're averaging 13. The Hawks are averaging 10.
The Hawks and Trae Young especially is just so good. I mean, we're talking about a guy who is number 1 in the league in assists, like not per game.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
he's not number 1 in assists per game. He's number 1 like in total assists. He's also flirting with being number 1 in points. He's 19 behind DeRozan. So he might lead the league. Like at the end of the day, he might, of everybody in the NBA, he would have more points than anybody else and more assists than anybody else. That's a crazy and I get that he's played, like, again, people don't like total points and total assists because it's a health stat a lot of the time. But still, that is a big accomplishment for Trae Young.
You're scoring at a high rate. You're distributing at a high rate. You're staying healthy. What is there to not like?
Right. It's like
you're taking care of the basketball.
That would be a really strong look. Trae Young is not in the MVP conversation, but for you to be on a team and put up more points than anybody else in the association, more assists than anybody else in the association, and doing that all for one team is ridiculous value. And he is just still an underrated. I saw a list on ESPN that had him not as a top 5 point guard, and I think that's a little ridiculous. He is
bogus.
He is really, really good, and I like the Hawks, and I'm a big Trae Young fan. And
the Hawks underperformed, I think, for a lot of this season compared to last season. For compared, like coming off an Eastern Conference Finals, debut, they kind of underperformed a little bit this year. And I would say one of the only reasons why they are where they are right now is because of Trae Young.
Yeah, and last year they were top 4 in point differential post All-Star break, and then they had that Cinderella run and made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. This year, once again, they're top 4 in point differential since the All-Star break. So they're getting, just like last year,
Ice Trae, man.
They're getting hot at the right time, and I think the Hawks are dangerous, just like they were last year. I mean, they're basically the same team. Yeah.
Ice Trae.
Going crazy in the garden like Trae, but yeah.
There's some debate about whether or not Trae Young is going to make an All-NBA team, and I've seen people will post like these lists, and it'll be like, well, who out of this list of 6 people do you kick out? And I forget who's on the list. He is All-NBA for the record, like no question about it. Just because he's on a team that is the 8th seed in the East right now does not mean that he doesn't make the All-NBA team. He is one of the best 6 guards in the league, for sure. He's at least had one of the best 6 seasons. So I would say I don't even think it's worth a debate. If you're leading in assists and points at the end of the year, you're all NBA, at least 3rd team.
Right. It's like that's crazy. That's crazy. That's crazy to do that. Me and Matt, we both had the takes on the TikTok. Is like, should the scoring title be total points at the end of the year or points per game? And I don't necessarily disagree with your argument. I just think like it's good. I think it was like an interesting perspective and a good dialogue to be like, hey, maybe we should just look at total points a little, because no one pays attention to it at all. And it's like, if you start like the gauntlet of the NBA season and you end on like no one scored more points than you, I just think that should maybe get a little bit more recognition than it had. And right now it's DeRozan and not Trae Young. So maybe he doesn't end number 1. We're talking about him like he's number 1. But they go back and forth basically each game. But whether you're number 2 or number 1, he's still been crazy impressive this year. And Trae Young, good. And I want to talk a little bit more about point differential because of the Celtics in the East. Their point differentials post the All-Star break has been 185. Ridiculous. The next best team since All-Star break has been the 76ers at 91. The Celtics
just in the East?
Yeah, just in the East. But the Celtics also, the actual best point differential point since the All-Star game has been the Grizzlies in the West at 196. But the Celtics have almost a 100-point lead on the rest of the East since the All-Star break in point differential, which is a ridiculous number. But they have been on a little bit of a skid since the Rob Williams injury. And that is one of the most impactful injuries of the whole season, I think, just because of the uncertainty it casts on the Celtics at this point in the year. Matt, what are your thoughts, I guess, on the Celtics and the injury? I know that he could come back in the second round, but it seems like he's going to miss the first round.
If he can come back in the second round, they're in good shape.
Right, because I
They're
think
in real
they'll win.
good shape if you can come back in the second round. They just got to get past whoever they're playing first. I think Tatum and Brown are still very good on defense. I think as much of a skid as they're having, they've really only dropped a couple of games.
It's been like 2 in a row, which they haven't lost to 2 in a row since like really early in 2022, which is why it's notable. But yeah, this skid is not something crazy like the Heat losing 4 in a row or anything like that. And I think even as we speak, am I right that they're beating the Mavs right now? No,
they're beating Washington
at the end of the third. The Celtics are up almost 40 though.
Right.
The Wizards.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. But yeah, Celtics good. Just as far as we're talking about the Eastern Conference, I really think they can make it out of here if Rob Williams comes back and doesn't have any setbacks or anything. The Celtics have just been on a ridiculous tear, and yeah, that's all I got to say is just pointing out that stat about point differential. The top 4 teams in the East overall are the Celtics, the 76ers, the Raptors, and the Hawks. So I don't know if it will be those will be the last 4 teams standing, but watch out for the Raptors and Hawks to steal a series on somebody. Like that's all I would say is like those are going to be tougher outs than maybe people think.
Hawks did it last year.
So that's all I got to say. That's all I got to say about that.
Did you guys want to talk about the Utah Jazz? I know that's something we.
I don't know if we've got time for it.
I think we can talk a little bit about the Jazz. Look, the Jazz, this is the last hurrah for them. I think like that's what our main point is. If they don't make a deep run or get to the finals, like I just don't see a world where they run it back again after just running into a wall year after year after year after year after year. I think that's just kind of what we wanted to say about the Jazz.
Yeah, I mean they've lost how many of their last? I don't know. They went on like some crazy losing streak. I know at one point. They've
been blowing leads. It's just been a frustrating last half of the year. As far as point differential goes, they are at 30, so it's not the worst to be at 30, but it's also not this crazy number that you'd expect from a championship caliber team.
I'm just looking at like the recent stretch of games. They just look so sporadic. So it's just like a lot of inconsistency, and I don't think that's where you want to be towards.
They just can't defend small ball, and it's a fatal flaw. And if you get them out there and they have to defend the perimeter, it's just over for them. Like they can't do it, and that's tough. That's tough. They have a fatal flaw, I think, and you can't have a fatal flaw. And I just don't know how the Jazz, who have never had big free agents, really are going to be able to add someone that pushes them over the top.
They're not. They're cooked.
They're cooked,
unfortunately. Yeah. They're cooked. And their defensive game plan is just like way too easy to counter. Like for instance, a lot of the blame when the Jazz kind of fail in the playoffs goes on Rudy Gobert, right? Because it's like all of a sudden they're not as good defensively. But it's not really his fault. Like it's not that Rudy Gobert is just so bad from the perimeter that that's all teams do, and they just abuse that, and it's like that's the thing that gets them. It's not Rudy Gobert. It's that if you go small ball, Rudy Gobert's on the perimeter, and the entire Jazz defense desperately needs him to be inside because they're terrible defensively. Their idea is to funnel guys into Gobert, and they can't do that if he's on the perimeter if you go small ball.
Right.
So it's really, and like, is Gobert great on the perimeter?
It's easy.
No, but there's also a lot of centers like that. And it doesn't in the world for other teams. So they're just not built very well. Mitchell plays very good, but it's like they don't really have a path to adding another guy. So I don't know. I think unless they go on some sort of run, I think Mitchell's out of there. I think Rudy Gobert is going to be really hard to trade because he's making so much money. Like I've seen some people say, oh, that's the big move that the Hornets need to make. And he's a great player. They just can't afford him. He's going to end up costing like $46 million down the road. And some team probably will end up not caring about that isn't in such a small market. But it's just they're in a very, very tough spot.
They are. And it's one of those, the question is like, would you rather be a little bit above mediocre, not get anywhere, or just have a chance to totally rebuild? And I feel it's the new Blazers. They're the new Blazers. Yes, they are. The odds are that
Donovan Mitchell isn't going to just like stay there forever.
Yeah, that's
And
probably true.
Just tap out eventually.
With all
so
the
that's
things,
kind of my thoughts on them.
Yeah, with all the things we've heard about frustrations between Gobert and Donovan Mitchell, and frustrations with even like the health staff when Mitchell missed some games early last year when they were the 1 seed, and then like I think Mitchell was held out of the first series a lot of the time, and the team was kind of confused on why that was happening. Every year there just seems to be a little bit of drama between them, and Gobert shutting down the whole league or just some shit, like where it's got to be a frustrate. It just doesn't really seem like the team chemistry is where it needs to be there. It doesn't really seem like everybody's having a great time. And after they blew that lead to, I believe it was the Clippers, Mitchell saying, this is the same shit as last year, same exact thing. And you can tell that he's kind of getting frustrated. And once they get bounced in the playoffs, and they most likely will earlier than they'd like, he's going to be thinking same shit as last year and the year before.
Well,
and I'm in Utah.
Also, yeah, Rudy, I don't mean to like repeat stats or anything that I see, but I saw one really funny. Donovan Mitchell averages 2 passes a game to Rudy Gobert, not 2 assists, as they worded it, 2 passes.
2 passes.
That's
He hates him.
That is an insane number.
This isn't Stockton and Malone here. This is not the.
So
this is a bad pairing. It really is, and I don't think they like each other. I don't think they like each other. That's the other thing. I don't think Mitchell and Gobert like each other. I think they don't get along, and I don't know that because I'm not there. But just like it's just the vibes, and it doesn't like. I think Gobert's not as aggressive as he should be, and I also think Mitchell just kind of doesn't like him and doesn't want to give him the ball because he doesn't trust him. But that's just me being slanderous. I don't know if that's true or not, but it doesn't surprise me that Mitchell's not feeding him. Anyway, that's probably the NBA storylines that
you know who does be feeding though.
If you're going to say HelloFresh, I'm going to say that we don't have an ad read today. We don't even need to be doing this.
But it's the 100th episode. Our gift to you is there's no ad read today. But
Blaine just hit us with
March
the mellow, like when he's not playing, he came in and almost took a shot. That's what feels like that was. No, we're not going to do the ad read.
Well, we have our what is it? Championship matchup for March Madness. And no Duke.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's no Duke in the.
I saw both of you were like, great to see Duke go out like this.
I didn't say anything about that. I did not.
Or maybe
I do not hate Duke.
Just Matt.
It was just Matt.
I've got some Duke hate. And
you're from Carolina though, so it's extremely valid for you to hate Duke.
Although I'll say this, I think even some people were taking it like a little bit too. It's like, all right. There's a point where you go from like celebrating a team you don't like losing to like, I don't know if this matters this much to me, man. It's cool to see UNC go from an 8 seed to be in the national championship, and from maybe a non-hater standpoint, it would have been cool to see Coach K as well in the national championship.
Right,
but it was a good game regardless. 15 on Duke, very good chance to be a Charlotte Hornet.
Yeah, shout out Caleb Love for scoring, I think it was, 13 straight points late in that game. Some key free throws towards the end. That front court or the back, those guards for UNC have really been the driving force for them, and it's been a blast watching them. They look like NBA players. They are good scorers at all three. They get to the basket. The acrobatic layups that I've seen them hit in this tournament have been just really fun to watch. So, and I've enjoyed, and the big white guy with the beard, Manic. I thought he had one of the more ridiculous plays I've seen when he hit that deep corner 3. And if his heels came down out of bounds, it wouldn't have counted. And for a guy that size to be that light on his toes and like come down
impressive.
on his toes and not go out of bounds like that was super impressive. So the way he moves and his awareness and his range were all like on display on that play. I thought that was one of I also loved the Duke player as he was coming down, pointing at his feet, and just the awareness to like know that is a potential thing you've got to look out for. I really enjoyed that play. I'm like, that's just high level like the fact like that instantly he starts pointing at his feet and the awareness to like think that he might land out of bounds and for him not to land out of bounds. I thought that was a really cool play to watch. But yeah, shout out UNC. Shout out Caleb Love. He's nails.
Our championship game is UNC and Kansas. Who do you guys have winning this?
I think I picked Kansas last time. I'm going to go UNC though. Why not?
I'm going to stick with Kansas. We all picked Duke last time, which successfully jinxed the team. I'll go Kansas. I think that they're the 1 seed. I know that UNC is on this run, but eventually Cinderella runs do kind of have to end, and there probably is kind of a talent gap, but it's kind of tough to find. I know that UNC had 0 bench points midway through the last game. Like, I think that lack of depth could get a little bit exposed. They have a really good starting five, but it's been a lot of games. It's been a long road, and I think maybe the depth will come back to bite them a little bit.
I'm gonna roll with UNC. They did beat the best team in the tournament, St. Peter's. So, yeah, I don't know. I can see the Cinderella story thing with you, Theo, though. But I'm gonna just roll with UNC. More fun.
I thought the Duke guy, Paulo Banchero, is going to be the first overall pick. That guy's ridiculous and about as good of a Duke player as we've seen, it seems. Like, really explosive. I mean, he was just getting to the basket at will basically the whole tournament and completing some just really, really acrobatic layups, shots, whatever you want to say. Definitely someone who seemed to like kind of someone who you could bet on as a franchise cornerstone with the first overall pick. He was balling this tournament. And this draft class doesn't maybe seem quite as stacked as the last draft class, and it'll probably be a long time until we see a draft as stacked as the last draft class again. But I thought I was really impressed with the way that he looked. But yeah, that's about all I think.
This draft class is pretty great too.
Yeah, it is. But it's hard to be as stacked as last draft class.
Well, yeah, a lot of the rookies from this season are looking pretty crazy. It's tough to be like that, even when you have a lot of good prospects.
Right. But yeah, no, I think that I would take him number 1 from what I've seen. But again, I have not scouted that much.
Not as much as you have for the NFL.
Not as much as I have for the NFL.
Which is probably going to be our next episode. We will probably end up doing some more prospect analyses.
For sure. Maybe linebacker. Yeah. I've looked at linebackers. Maybe we can do some.
Yeah, we haven't talked
Devin
about
Lloyd,
linebacker yet. So
Dean.
It wouldn't be a bad
That's
thing
what I'm looking at now. So
yeah, I think that pretty much wraps things up for us. As always, tons of content coming away on all platforms. Again, wanted to thank you all for making this 100 episodes strong. If we had made it 50 episodes and we only had like 10 listeners, I don't think we would have made it to 100. So it does kind of fall on you guys, and it means a lot that we've gotten this far. Don't miss out on all the great content coming away on all platforms. We hope to bring you 100 more fantastic episodes, and as always, from Corn Boy, Bird Boy, and Lemon Boy, we will catch you all on the flippity flop. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Stay Hot. I'm Bladen Kirk, joined as always by the 2 greatest co-hosts of all time, in Matthew Sponauer and Theo Ash.
Baker sucks, dude. Baker is horrible. I think he's like literally a backup. I do. He's not good at anything. They would agree.
TikTok's gonna fucking kill you.
Why do you have a Josh Cribbs jersey?
Why don't you have a Josh Cribbs jersey? You're the odd one out here.
Well, because Matt had a Josh Cribbs jersey on, but I didn't want to wear my home Josh Cribbs because Matt was already wearing a home Josh Cribbs, so I had to throw my away Josh Cribbs.
I didn't expect to see you in a Browns jersey, Sponauer. That's it. That's all.
What are your thoughts on the Pistons right now?
That's like asking a comedian, where do you get your ideas? It's like,
what's funny to you?
Right, you know what I mean?
Rock, paper, scissors instead of a coin toss. Put the game in the athlete's hand and win your rock, paper, scissors game to get the ball instead of choosing heads or tails and making it pretty much a luck-based thing.
It's not ice cream if it's water-based. It's a sorbet if it's water-based, or it's a popsicle if it's water-based.
It's a sorbet if it's water-based.
Yes, they're two different things.
We got all of our boxes. I got mine today.
No way you're still talking to me.
Please read
Please just read it.
What you need to do is get yourself an alternate Josh Cribbs jersey, and then all three of us can be in a different
Can
Josh
you get
Cribbs
an
jersey.
orange Josh Cribbs jersey?
I'm sure. I'll look it up on eBay after the show.
How do you like survive playing Madden, like as much as you do? Because
Like, gun to my head?
I tried that.
They can't be cream if it's not milk based. That is two different things.
Oh, look at Mr. Ice Cream Scientist over
It's
here.
not science.
Okay.
Cherries, Mr.
Ice cream has milk in it. It's like saying something's a sandwich without bread.